Welcome to Hey Boomer. My name is Wendy Green and I am the host for Hey Boomer. And at Hey Boomer, we are changing the conversation about getting older. And rather than seeing it as declining, we see it as opening an exciting new chapter, a time for exploration, self-expression, and learning. And today, we are going to talk about family traditions and rituals. My family did not have any traditions around Christmas because we were raised Jewish. Now, Hanukkah is a minor Jewish holiday, but we did have ways to celebrate that taught myself and my sister and brother about the kindling of the Hanukkah lights and the story of the fight for religious freedom. And each night, we would light a candle for 8 nights in the menorah, and we would always sing a prayer, and we would sing Rock of Ages, and we would play dreidel, and there were usually potato latkes, which are basically fried potato pancakes. We never got big presents like I saw some of my neighbor friends getting, but we would get, like from my parents, we might get a stuffed animal or some new pajamas. My grandparents would come over one night and we would get a present from them. And as I recall, we got some small presents from an aunt and uncle who lived nearby. I passed on the candle lighting and songs to my kids, and my parents would send presents to them because we didn't live close to my parents. And my kids have continued the ritual of lighting the candles with their children. They all have their own menorahs now, and they always post pictures of everybody lighting their candles, which is wonderful. And we have also added some Christmas celebrations and Christmas decorations to how we celebrate this season. I am now the keeper of family traditions in my family, and Passover is another tradition with all of the rituals that go along with the Passover dinner. It has been important to me to share the Exodus story and the ritual of the Passover Seder with my children and grandchildren. I feel like it gives them a sense of their shared history with people and cultures they will never know. Family traditions build connections between generations, and you never know what the impact is going to be on the children or the grandchildren. And I think it's important to share your history, to share your stories, and to share your traditions with them. I also think it's important to let them develop their own family rituals and traditions. My guest today, Donne Davis, has been talking about traditions and rituals in the Gaga Sisterhood organization for 20 years. I am so looking forward to learning from her today. I want to encourage you to check out my newest sponsor, Delilah Home. From soft hemp bed sheets to plush organic cotton, kitchen, bath, and beach towels, you'll want to put Delilah Home into every room of your house. The company only uses 100% GOTS certified organic cotton and non-toxic hemp for its home goods. And one of the things I really love about Delilah Home is that they also give back 10% of their profits to support the local Rotary Club, Humane Society, and Operation Warm in Western North Carolina. This is where their dog, Delilah, was lost for 62 days, and the people in the community really helped them when they were looking for Delilah, and they helped them find her. So go to bit.ly/DelilahHome-Boomer and pick out some wonderful, lush, organic bed sheets or towels for yourself or for your loved ones as gifts this holiday season. And of course, I want to talk about Rhodes Scholar. Many of my Hey Boomer listeners are solo women, and Rhodes Scholar offers some trips exclusively for solo women travelers. It also seems that many Boomer women still like to travel while their husbands would prefer to stay home. So taking advantage of these women-only trips are perfect for them also. Go to rhodescholar.org/heyboomer to see all the trips Rhodes Scholar has to offer. So let's go ahead and meet her right now. Hi, Donnie.
Hi, Wendy. So great to see you.
Oh, good to see you too. Thanks. Let me tell them briefly about you. So, Donne Davis is the founder of the Gaga Sisterhood, which is a national membership organization for enthusiastic grandmas. She founded the organization in 2003 after witnessing the birth of her first granddaughter and going completely gaga. Donne has hosted a bi-monthly speaker series for grandmas from all over the US for 20 years. She'll be stepping down from her role at the end of this year to pursue new interests. Donne is the author of When Being a Grandma Isn't So Grand, 4 Keys to LOVE Your Grandchild's Parents. It's a practical guide for building mutually respectful relationships with your grandchild's parents and handling common grandparent challenges. She writes and speaks about her experiences and observations of grandparenting in her award-winning blog at gagasisterhood.com. She is also passionate about the importance of rituals and family traditions. And for the past 3 decades, Donne has been teaching families how to create simple rituals and celebrations that give kids a sense of identity, security, meaning, and fun. Oh boy, that's a long history, Donnie. So let's go back to the beginning. How did you get started with the Gaga Sisterhood, and what are you going to be doing about it now?
Well, first of all, I love your introduction. I could really relate to it because I'm also Jewish. But let me get to the Gaga Sisterhood. As you said, 20 years ago, I was standing at the foot of my daughter's hospital bed when my granddaughter came into the world.
Wow.
And I literally leaped in the air and I went completely gaga. I remember running down the hall and saying to my husband, "We're grandparents." A couple days later, I came back down to earth. And that's when I realized I was not the first grandma to feel this way.
Yeah.
And then I got into my role. I spent the first 2 weeks with my daughter after she gave birth. And everything she did was so different from how I raised her. And I was fascinated and I was a little perplexed.
Yeah.
I thought, I've got to talk to some other grandmas and find out what their experience was like. So several months later, December 7th, 2003, I invited all the grandmas I knew to come over to my house. And I said, let's start a conversation about what it means to be a modern grandma. I've got this idea. I want to start an organization and call it the Gaga Sisterhood. And so for 3 hours, I had a little agenda. We talked about how we got our grandma names and how far we had to travel and what was our relationship like with our adult children. It was fascinating. And I said, let's continue this conversation. And everybody wanted to. And so that was how the Gaga Sisterhood was born 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it's just been the richest experience because I've connected with thousands of grandmas over the years. I've heard them just pour their hearts out about the challenges, because one of the things I said is, I want this to be a place where we can talk about our joys and challenges. And until the pandemic, we met in person at members' homes, and it was just women in the Silicon Valley, which is where I live in California. But then after the pandemic, I switched to Zoom, and we had grandmas from all over the country. We even had a grandma from Australia who would come on the call. So I realized, though, that the group was sort of splitting into 2 different groups. We had the original people who were had older grandchildren. My oldest grandchild is in Australia now doing her junior year, the whole year over there in college. And I'm going to go visit her in February.
Yeah.
So
No, that's so
I've
exciting.
been a grandma a long time. But a lot of the newer grandmas were, they have different interests, different needs, and they're starting the whole process from the beginning, which is so exciting. And I still love that. But I thought it's time for me to step down and to look at other options. So that's going to happen this Thursday. We're having our farewell lunch, December 7th. It's so symmetrical. I had my first meeting on December 7th, 2003. I'm having this final farewell lunch on December 7th, 2023.
You're not stepping away totally, right? You're still having your blogs and your newsletter, and you have so much wonderful information that you share.
I do. I have a blog that I've been writing posts, my newsletter, and I have the website has a lot of information on it. So now, instead of saying join the Gaga Sisterhood, I'm saying here are resources for grandparents at all stages. Because I really think today's grandparents are much more conscious of our role, our purpose, how we can be involved, and doing it sometimes diplomatically, sometimes maybe not so much, but yeah. And so I just really want to always be a resource for grandparents, and I still love talking about it.
Well, it is a challenge sometimes to be a grandparent, but I want to talk about traditions and rituals, because that's something that you have focused a lot on. Is there a difference between traditions and rituals in your mind?
There is. However, I often use the words interchangeably. But traditions are customs that we hand down from generation to generation. They're more of a concept, whereas rituals are an actual act. And I love this simple definition of ritual. It's a conscious action that's repeated in a certain order. And I even have an acronym to remember that. My late husband thought of this, and it's so clever. It's Cairo, like the city in Egypt.
Yeah.
So C, it's a ritual has to be conscious. That's what makes it a ritual different from a habit.
Okay.
A is an act. You're doing some action. I is intention. You have an intention. Now, it doesn't have to be a big intention, but there's an intention. R is repetition. We repeat a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And O is order.
So it has a certain order.
Yeah. So those are all the components of a ritual.
I like that. So like lighting the Hanukkah candles is a ritual because we do them in a certain order. Mm-hmm. And it's also a tradition because we tell the story.
And we passed it down from generations.
Yeah. Cool. So tell me about some of your favorite traditions with your grandchildren.
Well, you were talking about one of the Jewish holidays, Passover. And that, to me, is one of the most symbolic of all the Jewish holidays. It's really telling the story of the Jews' exodus from slavery. And there are all kinds of symbols. And there's a plate that has a lot of symbols on it that we use when we tell the story and read the story. So one of the items on the plate is called haroset, which is a mixture, kind of like a very thick jam of apples, raisins, and nuts.
It's delicious.
So my favorite tradition is to bring my grandma's old meat grinder. You know, have you ever seen those meat grinders where you put meat in and you crank it up?
Yeah.
You crank it with your hand. It's really old-fashioned. It's a metal thing. And it's heavy. But I always brought it to my daughter's house. And every year, my granddaughters and I would make haroset. And we had to cut up the apple, peel the apples, cut them up, put them in this, the tube. And then we'd add the raisins and the nuts. And then we'd grind it out. And it'd take about an hour. And I'd tell them about their great grandma, Amelia, who was my adored grandma. She was such a good buddy of mine, and we spent a lot of time together. So that's one of my favorite traditions, to make the haroset for the Passover Seder.
Yeah, I have never thought of doing it in a meat grinder. Well, I don't have one, so
yeah. Not too many people do, I don't think.
But
I love that, you know, it's It's carrying on a tradition because that's what my grandma used to make it. It's remembering her. It's teaching values. It's connecting to the past. Those are all good things that are benefits to children with respect to rituals.
Yeah, and so that is one of the important things that grandparents can bring to the family is passing on these rituals and traditions because we include the stories from
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And it teaches them values, shows that what your values are when you talk about it, your family, your religion, your traditions, all of those things are really important and they're fun.
They are fun. Now that your grandchildren have gotten so much older, how has that changed for you to be able to share traditions or see them move on to in other
Yeah.
generations?
Well, it's really interesting. I think one of the most important things that grandparents need to realize is that our grandchildren grow up. And
They do. They stay like cute puppies, do they?
yeah, they grow up and they grow up faster than we realize. I mean, it just feels like a blink of an eye. So their interests change. And the mission of the Gaga Sisterhood has always been to inspire grandmas to keep growing and learning. And
Mm.
so we have to do that and we have to stay current with their interests. So the funniest thing, a couple years ago, a friend of mine told me about the New York Times word puzzle called Wordle.
Mhm.
Do you do it?
I don't, but I'm aware of
Oh,
it. Yeah.
okay. Well, I started doing Wordle, and just about that same time, my oldest granddaughter started doing it too. So every afternoon at 4 o'clock, I sit down and do Wordle, and then I send her my score, or sometimes she does it first and sends her her score, and we compare notes and we just text each other and write little notes. And then her younger sister, who's 16, also started doing Wordle.
Ah.
And so we have that little ritual, which I call a ritual because we do it every day. We do it in a certain order, and it's very satisfying. And then with my youngest grandchild, Sophia is 9,
Okay.
and since the pandemic, and she lives in Southern California, we have done a Zoom call every single weekend since a pandemic started. And she also loves rituals. And so we started kind of an order of how we do these Zoom calls. And she makes a little agenda.
She does.
And we go through and we have show and tell, and then she'll draw something and teach me how to draw something. And sometimes she'll read a book to me, and then we'll go get a snack and we'll play this game called Guess My Snack. And then we sing a goodbye song. And we had a goodbye song for a long time. She's very musical. Last weekend, she played her new viola for me. So I
Wow.
consider all of these wonderful rituals. And there's different kinds of rituals. There's daily rituals that we can do by ourselves, like meditating or writing in a journal. There's family and friend rituals. There's holiday rituals and birthday rituals. And there's life cycle rituals, like a baptism when you're born and a funeral when you die and everything in between.
I love what you're doing with your grandchildren. And I know there's a couple of people on this watching the show live today that are long distance grandparents. And so I think you've just planted some nice seeds for things they can try to do with Zoom calls with theirs. I love that idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So talk to me about when traditions start to change. We bring in these stories and these rituals, and then our children marry into other families or partner up with other people from other families, and they bring in other traditions. How have you seen grandparents adapt to some of the changing traditions that suddenly show up at holiday times?
Yeah. Well, I want to share the first book that I ever read on rituals.
What?
Rituals for Our Times.
Yeah.
It's written by two psychotherapists, and they really approach it from an interesting perspective. They explain what rituals are, why they're valuable, and they talk about how rituals need to be evolving and flexible because a lot of people are raised with rigid rituals and then they hate rituals
Mm.
because they've been forced to do something and it just didn't sit well with them. So
Hmm.
I think the important thing about rituals is that you need to get buy-in. When you're doing a ritual, you need to make sure everybody's wanting to do it. And if you get resistance, you need to reevaluate. And sometimes you need to revitalize your rituals. You need to have a conversation before the holiday and say, it seemed like last year when we were doing these things that not everybody was really into it. And I'd love to, you know, think of some new things and have your input. Can we do something that really speaks to everybody and make it a group ritual that feels fun for everybody? And I think that's what grandparents need to do. We may have loved a tradition that our grandparents did with us, and it may not be relevant, it may not be fun, and the kids may just not be into it. So you have to open up and say, well, what would be fun for you?
Yeah, that's a good idea and not always easy, right? Like and I think it changes. I was thinking about Thanksgiving and when mine were little, we used to go around the table. What are you thankful for? And my parents were there. And, it was cute when they were little because they'd come up with all kinds of cute things. Well, then they hit their teenage years and their young adult years, and they were like rolling their eyes every time. Like, oh gosh, here we go again. And then this year, we did Thanksgiving at their house, at my son's house, and they brought it up.
Mm.
So I guess not completely abandoning it made it, something that they thought maybe was worthwhile.
Yeah. It's so wonderful when our kids embrace things that we taught them. It's like such a good feeling.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a little spin on that ritual because I did this and it was so much fun. Instead of everybody going around the table and saying something they're grateful for, I gave everybody a construction paper leaf that I'd cut out. And I had each person secretly write down on the leaf something they were grateful for. Then we put all the leaves in a basket. And after dinner, we went around and picked out a leaf. And if it was yours, you put it back and picked another one. And then we read the leaf out loud and tried to guess who the person was who said that expression of gratitude. And that really was fun. And it was lighthearted and we, we laughed a lot. So that
Yeah,
that
that's a
that
very
might be a
creative.
way to just elevate it a little bit.
Right. That's a very creative idea. And I think I mentioned to you I did something similar where we made um like a crepe paper chains, like you might
Mhm.
on a Christmas tree. And the kids, the little ones, they really took off on that because they were making
Mhm.
lots of
Oh,
lots of
that's nice.
chains of what they were grateful for. And so we had this whole big chain that helped us decorate our table, our Thanksgiving table. So that was really fun.
I just thought of another thing a few years ago when I was up at my daughter's and, we were having Thanksgiving. I said, "Okay, I know you're all expecting me to ask you to say what you're grateful for, but I wanna do something different this year because you gotta be innovative. You gotta keep them on their toes."
Yeah, right.
And so I said, "Let's each go around and say something we appreciate about someone at the table."
Ooh, how did they
And,
take to that?
oh, they loved it. They
Yeah?
really loved it, and, then after we all went around once and we picked different people, everybody said, "Well, we wanna do it so everybody gets appreciated."
Really?
Yeah, it was so, just touched my heart. It's
So
really
you've
sweet.
taught your children rituals and traditions since they were very small.
Yes.
Where did your interest in all of that come from originally?
Well, it's generational. I had a lot of rituals with my grandma when I was growing up. I grew up in San Francisco, and she was a native San Franciscan. She was 12 during the 1906 earthquake.
Whoa.
Yeah, and she used to tell me stories about camping out in Golden Gate Park right after the earthquake. So she always hosted Thanksgiving, and we had a lot of traditions at Thanksgiving, and then passed them on to my mom, who really was a huge inspiration to me when I was growing up, because she made a big deal over all the holidays, the secular holidays, the Jewish holidays, our birthdays, anniversaries. We took family vacations together. So I wanted to pass that on to my children. And now my daughter and my daughter-in-law both are very into traditions and celebrations. And so I've been thrilled to see that carried on.
Yeah.
And you know, the I do have a story about how it all started.
Okay.
My late husband and I wanted to renew our vows for our 25th wedding anniversary. And so we decided, well, I kind of decided, I asked him if we could celebrate by renewing our vows. And he said, all right, my present to you will be that I'll do it. He was not, he's more of an introvert.
Mhm.
So we created a ceremony. We wrote out a ceremony. We worked with this wonderful feminist rabbi, and we invited all of our friends to this celebration and this ceremony. And there were about 25 people in our living room. We did the whole ceremony because it felt more meaningful than when we got married 25 years before that. And all of our friends told us how powerful it was to experience that ceremony filled with rituals. And it got me thinking about how we don't emphasize enough the importance of rituals in our lives. They really enrich our lives. And a lot of times people have a connotation that rituals have to be serious or solemn or centuries old, but they don't. And they don't have to be religious either. They can be something very simple. And when you do a ritual, you elevate yourself, your spirit, because you're conscious of doing it. And if you really think about it, we probably have a lot of rituals in our lives that we don't call rituals. But if we
Mm.
thought about it, we could identify them as rituals.
Well, like in the post about our show together, I was saying my ritual in the morning is to have my coffee in my cozy corner of my couch and doing my
Yes.
journaling and reading,
Yeah.
and it is a ritual because it's conscious. I do it every day without
Yeah.
fail, every day.
Yeah. And you have
Yeah,
an order that you do it in, and you have an
I do.
intention.
Yeah, yeah. So have you ever experienced, Donnie, where you've gone into a celebration with your family and you've had, great memories of what it's been like, and you're expecting, my mother always says, expectations get you into trouble,
Oh, yes.
right? But you're expecting like all this wonderful warmth and love and happiness and joy, and it doesn't always turn out that way because it doesn't meet your expectations. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh, so awkward.
So awkward.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were the keeper
Mhm.
of the traditions and rituals. Women tend to be the kin keepers, I call them.
Mm.
We're the ones that keep the family traditions going, keep the family together. Not always, but a lot of times. And I think that expectations can really set us, off in the wrong direction, because we have this hope and dream of how it was in the past, and we want to recreate that. And you've got to be really conscious of when you're doing a ritual. If you're good at feeling the room and you're not feeling it, you got to stop. You got to be honest and say, doesn't feel like everybody's into this. Am I right? And, you have to let go of it, and hopefully you can do some damage control and you can say, "Okay, anybody got any other ideas?"
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one of the biggest things about the holidays, I hear this from grandmas all the time, is the disappointment around a lot of things. One is they don't get to host the holiday that they used to host because now, the children are going in different directions, or their grandchildren are long distance and they don't get to be with them, or they don't get invited to the one party that they really want to go to. And there's just a lot of expectations followed by you just set yourself up for disappointment, and you can't help it.
Yeah.
We want to be part of everything in the holidays most of the time.
Uh,
So, yeah.
yeah. Awkward is a good word for it. It is. And then we as women, we come home and we're like, oh, woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? And
I think it's really hard to
mm,
be that frank in the moment. But boy, if you've got the guts and the courage to do it, I would say just put a break on it and say, "It doesn't feel like this is going well."
yeah. And you mentioned earlier in our conversation about having the conversation with the parents of your grandchildren before you go to the
Mhm.
holiday to understand what their expectations
Yeah.
are and what their boundaries are. And how does that go? How do you see that conversation going?
Well, I am a big, proponent of communication. It's not always easy, especially when there's tension in the moment. That's the hardest for me. It's like
Hmm.
calling something when it happens.
Yeah.
Gotten really good about apologizing in the moment because I have made a lot of blunders. There are there are just so many times when I've said the wrong thing or, done something. So my kids know me and they expect that I'm gonna say, "Can we talk about what's coming up and what's everybody's expectations and do we wanna do something different this year?" I was just talking to my daughter yesterday because I'm gonna go see her this weekend. My 16-year-old granddaughter is gonna be in a piano recital. She's gonna
Oh.
be playing Clair de Lune, and it's a beautiful piece. So I said, "Do we have time to make potato latkes for Hanukkah? Because Hanukkah
Hmm.
starts on Thursday." And she said, "Oh, I don't know if we're gonna have time this year." And I said, "Okay, that's all right. It's we'll light the menorahs and do something different." But, yeah, I'm just learn to go with the flow. If you can learn to go with the flow and not stay attached to what you want and talk about it beforehand.
Yeah. That's such wise advice. And, I mean, I could hear your daughter's, oh, and she didn't want to disappoint you. And sounds like you handled it beautifully. Like you didn't let her know that you were maybe a little disappointed, but
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, and when they're teenagers, man, it really does change. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Now, what about, I know we're talking about grandmothers and all of that, but what about the grandfathers? Is there a role for them in bringing forward the family traditions?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's so important, and I think more grandpas have evolved over the generations too, for getting more involved. I see a lot of grandpas pushing strollers, which,
Yeah.
you know, in when I was raising kids, my husband wasn't pushing the stroller that much.
Right. Right.
But grandpas bring their own family, their own family history, and I think it's so important for grandpas to share their life stories, their fun stories, their work stories, their traditions, and be as involved as they can because if you're fortunate enough to have grandpas in the picture, you want them to be involved and participate.
Yeah. I used to get a little bit confused. When the kids were little, the grandkids were little. it was easy for me. I would just go and play. That was
Mhm.
just fun. Now that they're teens, um, I get torn between spending time with my daughter and daughter-in-law and son-in-law and, preparing and setting up and cooking and spending time with the grandkids who are teens who are really rather be on their phone, I think, or hanging
Mhm.
with their friends or hanging with each other. Um, it's a fine line there of how to manage that that interaction, at least in my experience.
Mhm. Yeah.
Did you experience that?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things I'm always looking for new ways to engage with my grandchildren. There's first of all, my grandchildren love games. They love playing games. So we do play a lot of games together. And it's been that way from when they were really little to right up until now. They love
Mhm.
playing games. So that's been a good thing and as a way for us to engage with each other. But I also love puzzles. And as I said, I do the Wordle puzzle with
Right.
my granddaughters. And then there's this little super quiz in the newspaper called it's Isaac Asimov's Super Quiz. And it's
Oh.
there's a little puzzle with about 18 questions from simple to easy, and they're all different categories. And so I'll cut them out of the paper, and then I'll bring them with me. And sometimes when we go out to restaurants, while we're waiting for our food, I'll read some of the questions. It could be a category like, say, capitals of cities in the United States, and it'll
Mhm.
ask all different questions about that. And it's fun, and everybody gets involved. And so, I do my best to try to find some little things to engage with them.
I think that's the challenge, to because they're all different. They all have different
Mhm.
interests and at
Yeah.
different ages, and yeah,
I think the
but
secret is to find out what their interests are before you go, and then, there's so many resources to find out, like Google what to do with a 12-year-old boy,
right, right.
and you'll get asked somebody told me they did that on GP Chat,
Oh,
and they
really?
got a whole bunch of ideas
Oh my
about what to
gosh.
do.
With my grandson, it would be put on one of those, devices where you're in
Oh, yeah.
alternate reality, and
Uh-huh.
that was very difficult. We did it,
Yeah.
but
That's fun.
well, if you can keep your balance while you're in a spaceship, it
I've
was
never
fun.
tried one of those.
Yeah, very different, very different. So, what are one or two takeaways that you would like to leave with the listeners today about traditions and rituals and their importance in the family?
Well, it's kind of a recap in a way of one thing is to treat yourself gently, to take time for a ritual for yourself. One of the rituals that my husband and I did was right after 9/11. We started lighting a candle every night at dinner, and we lit that candle until he died 5 years ago. And every night when we lit that candle, we said something we were grateful for. And we all hear how important it is to express your gratitude. It really lifts your spirit. And even after my late husband died, I continued to do that ritual on my own. I lit that candle every night and I found something, even if I was really sad, to be grateful for. And it lifted my spirits. So I would say do a simple healing, nurturing ritual for yourself.
I love that.
Something like lighting a candle and saying what you're grateful for, or taking a walk and being really conscious of your senses as you walk. And just calm yourself down because it can get frenetic in the holidays. And I think lower your expectations. If you can lower your
Mm.
expectations, then you won't be disappointed. But talk to your family and make your own wish list of what you'd like, and maybe ask your kids to make a wish list for what they not what things they want, but
Right.
how they want to feel and what they want to do.
Yeah.
And then share your list before the holiday.
Those are great ideas. I'm going to start doing the gratitude candle. I love that idea.
Yeah,
Thank
it's really
you.
powerful. And 2 years ago, some friends introduced me to a wonderful man, and we had a long distance relationship for 2 years, and 3 months ago, he moved in with me,
Hmm.
and we do that ritual of
Do
lighting the candle. The
you?
same candle. It's the same candle that a student gave me when I worked at a college 30 years ago, and, it's a
It's
beautiful
still, wow.
glass candle holder, and we put a little votive candle in there, and each night before we have dinner, we say what we're grateful for. And it's inspiring, but it's also enlightening because
Yeah.
you hear what the other person is thinking about.
That's a beautiful idea. I love that. So let
Mhm.
me tell people how to find you. You're still going to have the website, thegagasisterhood.com. And what will people find there?
They will find lots and lots of resources for grandparenting on every aspect you could imagine on grandparenting.
Okay. Yeah, it is a
They'll find a
wonderful.
link to my book, and that book is really for grandparents to have a better relationship with their grandchild's parents, because that is the key. So many grandmas, especially grandmas, go into the relationship thinking it's all about the grandchild.
It's
It's
true.
not all about the grandchild. It's about the grandchild's parents.
It's true. I remember my daughter saying that to me when, her first baby, and I was so in love with that baby. And she goes, Mom, I was your daughter first.
What about me?
Oh, right. Like, right. Okay, so check out the gagasisterhood.com. It really is a resource rich website. You could also email Donnie at Donnie, Donne, Davis at gagasisterhood.com.
I
So
love questions.
well, I love what you shared with us. So thank you so much. And not only do we love questions, we also love comments. So I would love to hear what is your takeaway from today's conversation about traditions and rituals with Donnie Davis. So you can email me at wendy@heyboomer.biz, and you can email Donnie at donniedavis at gagasisterhood.com and let her know as well. Also, don't forget to check out all of the lovely offerings at Delilah Home. So go to bit.ly/Delilah Home Boomer and see what they are offering that you might want to give as gifts to others or to yourself. And check out all of the wonderful trips at roadscholar.org/heyboomer. Remember, they have trips, educational trips to all 50 states and over 100 countries. It really is an amazing organization. I love traveling with them.
They also have grandparent trips.
They do.
Fabulous.
I've taken a couple of grandparent trips with
Yeah,
them.
fabulous grandparent trips.
Yeah. Have you gone?
No, but many of my gagas have.
They're great. They're really fun trips. Yeah. Let's see, next week. Next week, we're going to talk about hearing loss. So, this is something that many of us, if not most of us, will experience to varying degrees as we age. My guests, Sherry Eberts and Gail Hannon, wrote a book called Hear, Hear and Beyond, Live Skillfully with Hearing Loss. So I've been reading the book. It really has been fascinating. It's opened my eyes to things I had not considered, even though my mother has had hearing loss all my life, and it has progressed. But even with that knowledge and living with all of the time with her, I've learned so much from this book. So join me next Monday for my discussion with Sherry and Gail, and continue to embrace this time of your life with exploration, self expression, and fulfillment. And my name is Wendy Green with Donnie Davis. Thank you again. And
My
this
pleasure.
and this has been Hey Boomer.